Okay. I'm Megan Childress. I'm the director of the Center for Student Success.
Wow. So a growing, developing student center for students, and you've seen a lot of changes
Yes.
as a student to now here. But I'm suspecting that as a kid, you didn't say, I'm a third grader and I want to be the director of student success.
Yes, I would have had no idea what that was.
What did you want to do as a kid?
It depended on the day, really. The two probably biggest things that I can remember. One obviously didn't even remotely come to pass, and that was for a while I wanted to do hair. My mom had a doll from probably the late 60s, early 70s that they'd kept as like a collector item. And one day she's at work and I find it and I'm like, she would look great with much shorter hair. And I cut it, and you know what you never think of is most doll hair when it's shorter will stick straight up instead of like stay down. So it kind of looked like the Cynthia doll from Rugrats, if you remember that. So I think they kind of talked me out of that career. The other one was actually a teacher. So when I was in probably kindergarten through, well, actually it went much longer than it probably should have, through probably about 5th grade, I had a cousin who was a school teacher in Virginia, and anytime that they would like clean out the classrooms or whatever, he would bring me his leftover supplies. So I had like an overhead projector, I had an actual like seat and all this stuff. And so I would, whatever I did at school that day, I would get extra like worksheets or whatever, and then I would go home and I would teach my grandpa. So he always joked that he went to the 5th or 6th grade twice. And I don't mean like just casually. He had report cards that he kept in his Bible. We had a conduct chart, and if he, spoke out of turn, he got a little mark. So I was very serious about it. So I really thought for a while that I would be a school teacher. Kind of have ended up teaching to a certain degree, but definitely not like just a full-blown school teacher, and definitely no conduct charts.
So maybe not being a teacher yet, maybe. But what about a dream job now as an adult? Do you have a dream job?
I think that also depends on the day. My joking one has to do with getting to help choose baby names, logically and passionately. For a long time, I actually really wanted to be a book editor. And so reading's always been a huge part of life and has taught me a lot about life. And so book editing, I think, still kind of falls on the thing of if it ever happened that I'm in. Not likely, but, we'll see. I do occasionally think about maybe pursuing and being a professor at some point in life. That was also one of my considerations when I was a student here, and I actually met with a couple different professors, and they gave me kind of the real talk of what it's like to be a professor, and to a certain degree I think that talked me out of it, which wasn't a bad thing. I think it's good to know going into things, and also to consider at what point in your life are those things important. And so some of the things that we talked about, I'm thinking shorter term, I don't want to be doing that when I'm in my 20s or early 30s or whatever. And so who knows, we might get there one day. I've taught first year studies and I love it, so we'll see.
So today, with the potential of maybe being a professor or a teacher down the road, was there anything that happened that spurred you in the path that you are on currently?
Yes. So when I was a student here, I did work study as soon as I could freshman year until I graduated. I had a lot of different assignments. My first one was actually with the Chamber of Commerce, so it wasn't even on campus. Learned a lot about Hillbilly Days and event planning and things like that. It's not for me, I learned. But then ultimately ended up in what was kind of the early stages of student success before it was a center and it was just Embry Ray and Mandy. And I loved being in there, and kind of I always felt really good if Ambria was meeting with a student and was like, Megan may have some good wisdom for you, and would pull me in. And so I think that kind of started in its early stages. But I was also, I would be a student for life. I love school. I would probably have a degree in everything if it weren't as expensive as it is. Um, so school and like doing classwork and things like that was never an issue for me. Time management was never an issue. But in my last semester here, my mom passed away kind of suddenly, and so I kind of needed more of that personal help. And so, in sweep Ambria and Mandy and talk to my professors and make sure that I'm getting everything that I need and things like that. And so it kind of gave me that feeling of like, okay, well, academically I'm fine, but every now and then there are just things that are out of our control. And so it kind of gave me that feeling of, I want to do that for other people, because for some people it is academics that they're going to struggle with, and I got you covered on that. But then there are those life things that happen that you can't really see coming and don't really know who can be there to help or what to do in those situations. And so for me, it's kind of a comfort to be able to provide that and give that back to other students, and especially in that age group where you're learning and developing and figuring out how to do life as an adult and kind of just need some guidance, and I'm happy to provide that.
I know it's so hard to kind of summarize our life's purpose or meaning or call, but I'm going to ask you to do that. So in a sentence, how would you define your call right now?
I think that connection is kind of a basic human need, and so a big part of who I am and what I want to do for others is just provide that connection and show where you go from there.
So would you say your current job, your current role as Director of Student Success, that aligns with that greater call that you just talked about?
Yes, absolutely. I think that is a huge part, and especially as a director, it's not even just connecting with students, it's connecting with those in my team and those that we collaborate with across campus. And so it's just all these different layers of getting that connection and making sure that our students are getting what they need by collaborating with everyone else.
Now, you already mentioned some important people on your journey, but who would you say is maybe the most influential on who you are today, or who has most influenced your call?
I think it'd probably be a couple people. Definitely my mom. One of the questions that I get asked a lot as an advisor and then as the director by students is, when did you know what you wanted to do after you graduated? It took me a very long time. Actually, the Christmas break of my senior year, I actually sat down at my computer desk and was looking at grad schools because I knew I wanted to go to grad school. I was looking at grad school programs like it was, do you remember the gigantic JCPenney catalogs with the toys and you circle what you want? I kind of approached it like that, and it was, I'm going to look at these things until I find something that sparks something in me. And so, I sit there with my mom and we're looking and we're looking and we're looking, and actually found a program in guidance counseling. I thought that I would be a high school guidance counselor, and it turns out I'm essentially that for college in this role. But, I say it out loud, and it's just that moment of, why didn't we think of that before now? That is perfect. That is who you are. And so, other than, developing my personality and things like that, my mom played obviously a huge role in kind of pointing me in this direction. And then obviously Ambria and Mandy with helping me in undergrad. And I think also my grandfather that I mentioned earlier, I think that patience and just who he was and the way that he encouraged me to do things and to do things out of my comfort zone, and that nothing was really out of reach, I think was very helpful.
Now, you've talked about some difficulties without really labeling them that.
Sure.
You lost your mother kind of suddenly and in a very important part of your college journey, and how have you been able to navigate these obstacles, these pains, these difficulties to get where you're at today?
A lot to do with those connections, again, kind of leaning on people. I think a lot of, at least my adulthood, has been learning to ask for help as someone who had previously struggled with it, of asking, not just asking, but accepting help, especially as a mother. I'm a mother now, and there's the phrase, it takes a village to raise a kid, and cannot be more true. And so it's just understanding what your limitations are, and when you are overwhelmed and things like that, to actually lean on the people that are offering you their hand. Because I think often, especially in this role, I'm on the flip side of like, here, please let me help you. But I also realized what it was like on the other side of not quite being ready to accept that. And so a big part of that has just been knowing those limitations and recognizing when you need help and accepting it. And I think that's a big step for some people. Some people, not so much. They're comfortable and they understand that they need help. But I think we have a lot of students here that struggle with that, and I would have been one of them back in the day. But I think it's very important to have friends that you trust, and obviously faith plays a large role in it, and finding peace and comfort in trauma and in difficulty and things like that. And also understanding that these things unfortunately happen to everyone, and it's never at a good time. And it's like, when are you going to get sick? Probably in finals week, when you're most stressed. So accepting that it's a part of life, and that we're all humans, and that it's okay to feel really hard emotions, and okay to work through those. And for some people it takes a different amount of time, when those, when my mom passed away and then my grandparents passed away and things like that. It was especially apparent to me that grief looks so different to different people. Like the way that I was grieving was very different from pretty much everyone in my family. And that's okay. Just because I don't understand the way that they're doing it, or vice versa, doesn't mean it's wrong. So I think people just have to figure out what it is that's going to help you get through it. And as long as it's, reasonable and doesn't hurt anyone else, then that's okay. So I think giving yourself permission to work through it the way that is actually best for you.
So in hearing that, if a student says, wow, Megan, you are doing exactly what I want to do with my life, what did you do to position yourself to have this role or this call today?
I think for me, a lot of it, one of the things that I've always told students is that there's a lot of stress on choosing the right major. What is the right major for you? And I don't necessarily know that there's only ever one right major for one person. Dr. Kilgore Bowling jokes all the time that if she got to me just a little sooner, I would have been a social work major, and she's probably right. So one of the things that we kind of coach students through is looking at actual careers that they're interested in, and look to see what are the requirements of those, and what are things that they're looking for, because you can get those usually in several different majors. And so the example that I always used was, at one point, and pretty much still to this day, everyone in Student Success has a different degree. We have 3 advisors now. They don't have the same degrees, they don't have the same background, they don't have the same experience before they got here. I mean, I was a dispatcher for the state police before I came back here and was an advisor. My major wasn't criminal justice, it was English and communication. And then I went and worked at the hospital for a little while, more so just to make money while I was starting my master's degree. But I think that all of those experiences that we have, whether or not they seem related at the time, are preparing you for something. And I definitely feel like, dispatching and working in the public with the hospital and things like that, it's helped me to develop those skills. And so it's not always a major, it's not always work experience. I think it's a combination of all of those things. And so the best thing that I can tell students when they're trying to figure out what path they want to go down, look at those jobs, look at them online. I mean, we have computers all around us, they're at our fingertips. Just Google. Just sit one day and look at master's degrees like a catalog, or whatever it is that helps you kind of feel that spark, and then just do a little research, and we'll help anybody with that. We've done it plenty of times.
So when you deal with, students, and you deal with a lot of them, so many students come through your doors. When a student comes in and says, "Hey, I just really have no idea," right? I've looked through the catalog and I still don't know. What advice would you have for them?
Sometimes I think people aren't as can't think of the word. I just said it earlier today. I can't think of it. Self-aware. Sometimes people aren't as self-aware, and so one of the things that helps me is actually to go to people who really and truly know me and say, what do you think my calling is, or what do you think it is that I'm good at, or if you were ever going to say, oh, go see my friend Megan for that, why would you say it? Like, under what circumstances would you refer them to me? And I think sometimes getting that feedback from people who aren't ourselves and who aren't in here all the time is actually really helpful. But obviously you want to choose people who really do know you and have your best interest at heart. And for some, that may be a parent or a sibling or a friend or a professor or us or whoever. But if you have looked through all that stuff and nothing is really just making you feel something, then go to others and see what they could see you doing. Because I think sometimes it's good to get out of your own head, especially when you're a senior and you haven't figured out what you want to do. There's all that pressure and all that stress. And so I think feedback is so valuable. Academically, it's always great to have somebody look over a paper before you submit it and just get a second set of eyes. And with working, to be in a collaborative office where you can bounce ideas back and forth. I think creatively that's very helpful, but I also think it's very much helpful to get out of your own head for a second and see what others are thinking and feeling. And sometimes they just have really great suggestions. Maybe not, but sometimes.